Picture this, the vast, unforgiving desert of North Africa, 1942. The fate of World War II hangs in the balance, and it all comes down to a small, dusty railway stop in Egypt called El Alamein. This isn't just a battle, it's a monumental clash of titans, a turning point that will shape the rest of the war. On one side, the brilliant but overstretched German Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, and his formidable Afrika Korps. On the other, the newly appointed, meticulous British General Bernard Montgomery and his Eighth Army, desperate for a victory. The stakes? Control of the Suez Canal, the gateway to Middle Eastern oil, and the very morale of the Allied nations. To truly grasp the gravity of El Alamein, we need to rewind a bit. For 2 long years, the North African campaign had been a brutal, seesaw war. Armies advanced and retreated across hundreds of miles of sand, a deadly dance between the British Commonwealth forces and the German-Italian Axis powers. Rommel, a master of desert warfare, had repeatedly outmaneuvered his opponents, earning a near-mythical reputation by the summer of 1942. His forces were at the gates of Alexandria, just 60 miles from El Alamein. The situation was critical. A victory for Rommel would sever a vital Allied supply line and potentially knock the British out of the war in the Mediterranean. As Winston Churchill famously said, this wasn't the end, or even the beginning of the end, but it was, perhaps, the end of the beginning. The first act of this desert drama unfolded in July 1942, known as the First Battle of El Alamein. Rommel, sensing victory, launched a major offensive. But the British Eighth Army, then under General Claude Auchinleck, was not going to break easily. They had established a strong defensive line, a series of fortified boxes protected by treacherous minefields and tangles of barbed wire. Rommel's panzers slammed against this wall of resistance, but couldn't break through. The battle ground to a bloody stalemate. Both sides were exhausted, and Rommel's supply lines were stretched to their breaking point. He was forced to halt his advance, a crucial pause that would give the Allies the time they desperately needed to regroup. This stalemate marked a major shift. In August, a new commander arrived to lead the Eighth Army, General Bernard "Monty" Montgomery. He was a stark contrast to his predecessor's cautious, methodical, and a stickler for detail. But what he brought was an iron will and a clear vision. He immediately set about transforming the Eighth Army, rebuilding its morale, which had been battered by a series of defeats. He famously declared, "There will be no more retreating. If we have to live here, we will die here." Monty didn't just talk, he acted. He began a colossal buildup of men and material. Trucks, tanks, guns, and planes poured into Egypt. By October, his army was a behemoth. The Eighth Army had grown to nearly 200,000 men, over 1,000 tanks, and 750 aircraft. They now massively outnumbered Rommel's tired and poorly supplied force of 116,000 soldiers and just over 500 tanks. Montgomery wasn't leaving anything to chance. He meticulously planned his offensive, codenamed Operation Lightfoot. The plan was a classic 1-2 punch, a massive artillery bombardment to soften up the enemy, followed by infantry clearing paths through the dense German minefields, creating corridors for the tanks to pour through and shatter the Axis line. The night of October 23, 1942. The desert was silent until 9:40 p.m. Suddenly, the sky erupted in a deafening roar as over 1,000 British guns opened fire simultaneously. It was one of the most intense artillery barrages of the entire war, a storm of steel and fire that rained down on the Axis positions for 5 relentless hours. The bombardment pulverized defenses, shattered morale, and severed communication lines. Then, under the eerie light of the moon, the infantry moved forward. Sappers, the brave engineers, crept into the minefields, what Rommel called his devil-esque gardens, to clear safe lanes for the tanks. The fighting was ferocious. Rommel, who had just returned from sick leave in Germany, orchestrated a stubborn and skillful defense. The British advance was slower and costlier than Montgomery had hoped. The initial breakthrough didn't materialize, and for a few tense days, it seemed the battle might once again bog down into a stalemate. But Montgomery was patient. He adapted his strategy, conserved his forces, and prepared for a final, decisive blow. He pulled his armored divisions back, regrouped, and planned a new thrust called Operation Supercharge. This was the moment of truth. On November 2nd, the attack was launched. This time, it worked. British and Commonwealth armor, concentrated and powerful, smashed through the exhausted German and Italian defenses. A clear breach was made, and the Axis line began to crumble. Rommel saw the writing on the wall. His panzers were running out of fuel, his men were out of ammunition, and Allied air power was relentlessly pounding his supply routes. He knew the battle was lost. On November 4th, against Hitler's direct orders to stand and fight to the last man, Rommel ordered a general retreat. It was the only way to save what was left of his once invincible army. The retreat turned into a rout. The 8th Army pursued the fleeing Axis forces relentlessly across the desert, capturing thousands of prisoners and a vast amount of equipment. By November 11th, the Battle of El Alamein was officially over. The cost had been high. The Allies suffered around 13,500 casualties, but the Axis losses were catastrophic, with an estimated 70,000 killed, wounded, or captured. The Afrika Korps was shattered as a fighting force. The victory at El Alamein was a shot in the arm for the entire Allied cause. It was the first major, decisive land victory against the German army, and it sent a wave of optimism across Britain and its allies. The bells of victory rang out in London for the first time in years. The advance into North Africa was halted for good. The strategic consequences were immense. The victory secured the Suez Canal and the Middle East's oil fields. More importantly, it paved the way for the next phase of the war. Shortly after the victory at El Alamein, American and British forces landed in Morocco and Algeria in Operation Torch. The Axis forces in North Africa were now caught in a giant pincer movement. By May 1943, over 250,000 German and Italian soldiers would surrender in Tunisia, marking the complete expulsion of the Axis from the continent. This victory in Africa provided the Allies with a springboard to invade Sicily and then mainland Italy, opening up a new front and stretching German resources even further. For Rommel, El Alamein was the beginning of his decline. The myth of his invincibility was broken. For Montgomery, it was the opposite. He became a national hero, one of the most celebrated generals of the war. Today, if you visit El Alamein, you'll find the quiet, beautifully maintained Commonwealth War Cemetery. It holds the graves of over 7,000 soldiers who made the ultimate sacrifice in that desert battle. It's a somber and powerful reminder of the human cost of this pivotal victory. The Battle of El Alamein wasn't just a single event. It was a testament to meticulous planning, industrial might, and the incredible resilience of the soldiers who fought there. It truly was the turning of the tide, a moment when the Allies began their long and difficult march towards final victory. Thank you for watching, and if you found this journey into history interesting, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more stories from our past.